The time and the reps and the practice time to get better prepared and just improved overall is coming to an end here rather quickly. We will get our last evaluation of Oklahoma football, of course, for the spring in a couple Saturdays on the 22nd. Welcome to the Sooners live show that we present here each and every week on our Oklahoma channel here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video before you get settled in. Leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. Jason Ray's here to break it down for us. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. How about yourself?
I am doing just fine. We were running through, Jason and I, a few recruiting notes before we got revved up here, and one includes one Michael Hawkins, quarterback out of McKinney, Texas, who is going to make his announcement today.
Yeah, Mark. I think this looks really good for Oklahoma. And I think it's been between Oklahoma and TCU for quite some time. It's what's interesting, Mark. Over the last couple of weeks, he's much closer to TCU from a proximity perspective, but he has spent a lot more time at Oklahoma with Oklahoma. Whether it be visiting or whether it just kind of be watching practice and on campus and things like that. So things look good, and I think it was further. I think reading between the lines, TCU got a big time quarterback out of his name is escaping me. An Aledo kid, 3-4 star kid earlier this week. So I think between those two things and between how involved he's been with Oklahoma and what that looks like. Excuse me. I think would be a little bit surprised if Oklahoma didn't secure his commitment today, as you got here on the screen here. 6'2", 195 pound kid out of McKinney, Texas. Top, we'll see in terms of what that quarterback ranking looks like as the season goes on. Right now, he's the 19th ranked quarterback. Looks like they're in a 22-4-7 composite. So he's a guy that fits their style. Mark, he's a guy that really good zone read guy, and then has the ability to move in the pocket and things like that. So fits the style that Jeff Lebby and team is looking for. So I think this will be a good look at Oklahoma's second commitment of the season.
Haas Hedgney, I believe is how he pronounces his name, the TCU quarterback commit out of Aledo, Texas, earlier this week on the 6th of April. All right, Jason and I taking your comments and questions. We're going to break down the offensive line, and we will continue on with a couple of recruiting notes here that I have briefly. 4-star defensive back Aaron Flowers was an Oklahoma target. He has committed to Oregon. Sammy Brown, so he's a top-rated linebacker. Let's see. He's out of Georgia, Jefferson, Georgia. Number 1 rated linebacker in the country. Top 5 player in the country. Top-rated player in the state of Georgia. Is he 2020? Yeah, he's 2024. Sammy Brown. He made the comment, I just picked this up online, that OU has the best college football fans in America.
Yeah, no, he was on campus for a visit this past this past weekend, Mark, and he's a guy. We talked a little bit about this last year. There's typically a guy that Venables and the staff, really just kind of cling to, and a guy that they do, almost everything in their power to get. And I think this is going to be a guy for Oklahoma this year. And as you mentioned, number 1 rated linebacker out of the state of Georgia. And I think most people think it's probably Georgia has a decent lead for him, but he has been very, as you mentioned here, very, very pro Oklahoma from a fan's perspective, very pro Oklahoma just from a Venables and defensive staff perspective. So we'll see how that continues to go. That one's a guy that I certainly wouldn't expect that any kind of commitment to happen anytime soon with him being the number 1 rated linebacker in the country, but certainly a guy that I think Oklahoma will be in a battle with Georgia on when it's all said and done.
All right. Again, we are nearing the spring game, but we still have a couple weeks. We've got a couple spring games today, and then really rev up across college football for April's 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Oklahoma on the 22nd. Anything that you've gathered from recent spring reports?
Oklahoma's a little banged up on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't think it's anything of note from the aspect of anything that people should be concerned with come season. Um, the tight end room is particularly banged up. Caden Helms, Blake Smith, Jason Llewellyn, all three are kind of banged up. So that gives Oklahoma a lot of depth concerns along the tight end front. Right now, they only have one scholarship tight end, which is Austin Stockner playing. So that's creating some problems, as you would expect, just in terms of him being out there and doing everything. So they pulled in some walk-on tight ends just to kind of help out from a drill perspective, and then just from a continuity perspective. So Javante Barnes was, and I don't think this is anything serious either. Javante Barnes was in a walking boot in some practice photos a couple of days ago. And Roberts, and moving to the other side of the ball, Robert Spears Jennings Jr. is going to have a kind of, I don't know that I would call it a minor surgery, but he's going to have a shoulder surgery, which it's going to keep him out for the rest of spring, but he should be ready to go for fall camp. And just some notes that I've been able to kind of ascertain. There's still a lot of conversation, as you would expect, about Jackson Arnold, and it's kind of funny, and I think it's kind of interesting for people to see. And apparently, their first real, I think, mini scrimmage that they had, he was horrible. Um, really, just out there thinking too much, not really trusting his instincts, and things like that. Then they had another one, and he was outstanding. So I think he's got some coaching going on, and from what I heard is if he was to play at that level that he played in the first real scrimmage, um, it would be very, very difficult to keep him off the field. But that was said with a grain of salt that, the expectations is he's probably not going to be able to play at that level each and every game. But Venables says great things about him anytime he talks. He said the other day that Jackson's just a kid where football just comes easy to him. And so I think it will be interesting. A lot of people are inside the program are saying some of the same things that they were saying about Caleb Williams, about Jackson Arnold when he came in. So again, I would still be, as things progress through the spring here and through fall, I would be immensely surprised if he's a starter come game one, because at the same time, the source said, like, Dylan is Dylan. Like, he's running the team. He's not making big mistakes. He knows where to go with the ball. He knows the offense in and out. And so he's going to be very consistent right now. And Jackson, as you would expect from a true freshman, right now is going to have some flashes where his athleticism and his just his intangibles that he has that maybe Dylan doesn't have, or that are really kind of off the charts comparing the two. He will have some situations where he's like really, really good, obviously, and then he'll have some situations where you'll probably, kind of shake your head, like, kind of what are you doing type moments. But again, like I said, I'll be surprised, but with how this happens from time to time. I mean, we've seen a lot of examples of quarterbacks, obviously in Oklahoma with Caleb Williams, but we've got other examples throughout the country where some of these true freshman quarterbacks maybe aren't necessarily ready to go season or game one, but game 6, game 7, maybe they are a little bit more ready to go. So obviously that will be something that will continue to be discussed. But but I thought that was interesting to just kind of pass along. And I think general consensus of the offense, and as we kind of wrap up today, talking about the offense, I think there's some cautious optimism just in terms of some of the things that Oklahoma has back. But again, very much like we talked about in the wide receiver room, there's there's a lot of kids that are going to be counted on to make some plays that really haven't played a ton of ball for Oklahoma. So that will be interesting to see if it continues to happen. On the side of the ball, I mean, when you come out as the head coach and you say we expect our defense to be on another planet versus what they were last year. I think inherently, like within the program, within the staff, and then within the fan base, there is a certain expectation that comes with that, and I think you can say from one side, kind of tongue in cheek, that it can't get a whole lot worse than what it was last year at times. But I think on the other side of it, you if you're Oklahoma, you've got to get to a point where you can play complementary football. And so I think there's some real belief within the program that this has a chance to be a much better team defensively than they were last year. Now, how much better? What does on another planet defensively mean? I think that remains to be seen, because you still got a lot of kids that are young, that haven't played a lot, and the kids that are considered veterans on this team, when you talk about like maybe a Reggie Grimes or an Ethan Downs or an Isaiah Coe, to a certain degree, um, guys that have played a lot, they still don't know what it looks like to play, winning, dominating defensive football. So I think that's kind of I think that's kind of turning into a little bit of the mantra within this team, just in terms of the optimism and the belief that they got the kids that are good enough to play at this level, have the good enough to play really strong winning football for Oklahoma, but they haven't necessarily consistently done it on the field. And can they do that this year? So I think that will be good to just see what that looks like as we progress from spring into fall. But I think one of the things that they struggled with last year was depth, competitive depth, and if nothing else this year, Mark, I think the depth competitively is much stronger across the board. Any kind of position that you want to look at specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So I think there was a little bit of a belief that there's even if I don't play up to the standards that the coaches have for me, there's not someone behind me that can take that spot. So now I think there is, with particularly in the secondary, but now I think overall there certainly is. So I think that competitive depth will help in many ways.
Talking Sooners with all of you each and every week here live at the Voice of College Football. We sometimes have to deviate from our regularly scheduled Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. So here we are on a Saturday, and we appreciate you being here. And you have obviously subscribed and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live, because here you are. So thank you for that, and encourage other ones to do the same. We've got a Discord where you can talk Sooners all the time, talk college football all the time. Patreon.com, search Mark Rogers TV, jump on in there. And we just got another Patreon member here this morning. So I will be sending them the link to make sure that they're all set to go with Discord to talk college football again all the time, 24/7, 365, and a number of other benefits we won't need to get into right now, because we need to talk offensive line, which of course was a calling card under Bob Stoops, and then certainly into the Lincoln Riley era, where it was even up.
Hey, so I don't know if this is just me, but if you guys can comment. Oh, there we go. Okay. I was gonna say if you can comment on the chat. I think something technical happened with Mark. If you guys can still hear me, just let me know. But so yeah, where Mark was going with that, and obviously we'll get him back here. But where Mark was going with that is we kind of preview the offensive line. I think the offensive line has been an area certainly of strength of Oklahoma through the Bob Stoops tenure, obviously through Lincoln Riley's tenure as well. And so I think when you look at the offensive line, it's consistently been good, really really good. Even Lincoln Riley's year, there was a year, I believe 2017, could be the year 2018, where Oklahoma has all of their offensive linemen that are still playing in the NFL today. So I think when you look at that, just theoretically speaking, I think there's the bar, the bar gets raised each and every year, and I think you've not necessarily seen as dominant of an offensive line play, as you have in the past, under head coach Bill Bedenbaugh, and I think he's still one of the best in the game. But I think there's whether it be some of these kids that they have that haven't really panned out, as well as you kind of would expect, or whether it was a little bit of believing that you can come in and just be outstanding, just when you come into the practice field or on game day. And so it's not been horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not been probably quite as good as a lot of people would expect and would believe. And so when you look at it this year, guys, I think the offensive line is an area that, again, very much the same way as in a lot of position groups. I think there's a lot of optimism that this unit could be even better than a year ago. But again, it's going to be a lot of kids that really haven't done it, or haven't done it at Oklahoma, specifically. So Oklahoma has lost a few kids, obviously from last year's team, and you really got two guys that are returning starters, and one guy that wasn't always a starter. So you kind of start with Andrew Rame. So he's a guy for Oklahoma that has continued to really be inconsistent with his play. I think he's had trouble staying healthy, particularly last year. But he's probably going to be the guy that will be your starting center. But can he do all the things that you need him to do as a center? Does he have the strength? I think he's a guy that will continue to make moves under the strength and conditioning coach of Jerry Schmidt. But I think he's a guy that has to be more consistent. He can be. He shows flashes of being a really good offensive lineman, a really good center. But can he continue to do that and be good on that in that front? So he's one guy, and then McCain Matower is another guy, who was a starter for a majority of the year, but he is also was wildly inconsistent, got pushed around a lot, and he was a guy that I think a lot of people thought that he would be kind of a plug and play starter, be really good based on his experience that he's had in the Pac-12. But he just really wasn't as consistent as Oklahoma needs them to be. So I think as you look at this offensive line, guys, going into spring, it is a very it is I'm sorry. So Mark apologizes. He had somebody that accidentally cut his cable line, and knocked, or I don't know if they cut his line, but they knocked him out. So I'm not sure if he'll be able to be back, or not. But we'll continue to go through here. But so so you look at this, and I think you've got 4 and maybe even 5. I don't know if Nate Anderson's going to be able to push Andrew Rame at the center position, but you've got four positions that are really up for grabs. Um, I think you look at what Tyler Guyton was able to do through the year, and particularly in the bowl game against Florida State. And there were some times he got abused, but there were some times he held his own, which is really good considering he was up against one of the best defensive ends in the country. Excuse me, at Florida State. So I think you kind of pencil him in as one of your starters on the um, at the tackle position. But then you've got other guys. You've got Savion Byrd, who is another guy that played fairly well in the bowl game against Florida State. And you've got a lot of these new kids that played in that game, guys. But then you have to look at the play was a little bit inconsistent, but Oklahoma ran for over 300 yards in that game. So you've got that. Certainly, you've got that working for you in terms of the experience is a little bit limited, but you've got a lot of talent there. And so Savion Byrd is a guy that I think a lot of us watching were a little perplexed last year just to see why he didn't play as much as he did, and maybe it comes down to practice play and not as good at and not as solid as a practice player. And as a coach I mean, you can only play the kids that practice well. And so I think he's a guy that obviously has an opportunity to make some plays and to be just to be a solid guy in there in the middle of that offensive line. And then you kind of look at Josh Bates, who's another kid that came in last year, played a little bit on the offensive line. Particularly, and I talked a little bit about Nate Anderson, and then you've got the freshman Caden Green coming in the spring is going to be big for him. Is he good enough? Will he be good enough to make to kind of make a move in spring ball here? And as you go through the season, Jake Taylor is another guy that you look at potentially a guy that could be to be one of your tackles. I know Bates got that position in the bowl game and unfortunately hurt himself ACL early on. I'm sorry, not Josh Bates, Jake Sexton. My apologies. Was the guy that got hurt early on in that game and wasn't really able to play a lot. So, but I think all indications are he'll be ready for the season for fall camp. So that's very positive in terms of that. But we talked about McCade Mattower a little bit. And then I think the other one is Walter Rouse. He's a guy that you would expect to kind of just the experience that he has at Stanford. I think he's a guy that Oklahoma really wanted. He decided to go elsewhere, then changed his mind and decided to go ahead and come to Oklahoma. So I think he's a guy that Oklahoma really, really likes. But will have that opportunity to compete. But I think he will, and he'll be out for the spring, most of the spring at least. But he'll have an opportunity to be what we thought McCade Mattower would be as a pretty significant plug and play kid for Oklahoma this year. So that's just a big rundown of the offensive line. As we mentioned, Colin Montgomery's another guy we really didn't mention, but a lot of competition I think that we'll see throughout the spring and certainly the fall to as we move forward. In this, and like I said, there's a lot of belief that this running back room can be really good, but it will be obviously it's dependent on how well this offensive line performs. And like I said, with a lot of the other folks, we see a lot of optimism, kids that are good enough to play, but what does that look like from last year to this year for us? So So we'll take some of your questions, whatever comments, questions that you have here. We'll kind of go through some of those. And just as a reminder, the Michael Hawkins commitment will be today. So keep your eye on Twitter for that. Certainly for me personally, I would expect him to get the nod for Oklahoma, or give Oklahoma the nod, I should say, and secure that commitment of the second commitment of the 2024 class. So let's see. You got a question here. Oh, so since I'm not the host, I'm not able to display it here on the screen. So, but I'll do everything I can. So I've got a question here from Mitchell Beats, I believe. Jason and Mark, and all Sooner sports teams going to the SEC at the same time. I thought I heard the softball team was going the following year after football. Yeah, so it's depending on essentially like when the school year starts, or that point in time. So Oklahoma's going to go in 2024 I believe as of like August. Like August 1st, I believe, 2024. So obviously the softball season and spring sports will start before then, in 2024. So that's the reason why all sports don't necessarily go at the same time. So, like as you mentioned, softball's going to be a team that's going to have, obviously this year, and then one more year next year in the Big 12 before going over to the SEC. So that kind of explains that. So softball and baseball and like gymnastics and things like that will be a year delayed. But good question. Mark Vigil, not really a question, but more of a comment. But DG is not good enough at the Oklahoma level. OU needs and expects better from their starting quarterback. So I think you can take this a couple of ways. We've talked about this a lot. So you can take this a couple of ways. You know, DG is really good at what he's really good at. When I say that, he knows the offense really, really well. He moves fairly well. From a quarterback perspective, certainly better than not at the same level, obviously, as a Caleb Williams, but certainly better than a Spencer Rattler back there. But I think he had really good numbers for the year, a really good touchdown to interception ratio. But I think there's so many Oklahoma fans, including myself, that kind of expect and kind of really just have such high regard and expectations for people, for kids at that position for Oklahoma. And so you've got that to contend with. You've got expectations of Baker Mayfield, of Kyler Murray, of Jalen Hurts, of Jason White, of Josh Heupel, of all of these quarterbacks through the years. And the minute that some of these players don't live up to the expectations is when kind of the negative connotation kind of comes with that name. So when I say he's good at what he's good at, knows the offense left and right, knows that really, really well, is very elite, but outside the numbers in terms of the deep ball and his accuracy there. Where he struggled a lot this year was down the middle of the field, and his accuracy kind of failed him to a certain degree. And so it'll be interesting to see if that, and I'm sure that will be an area of maturity, I think, an area of improvement for Levy and DG coming into this year. And so the thing that we have to remember with DG is he's not a guy that's going to be good enough to, sorry, excuse me, guys. He's not going to be a guy that's good enough to win games by himself, essentially. So that's why I mentioned the comparisons with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts. Those three guys, two of which were Heisman Trophy winners, one was a Heisman runner-up, they had the ability to put a team on their back, and it's like, okay, like I don't care what the defense is doing, like I'm going to go win this game. I'm going to go make plays. I'm going to go win this game for us. So many times on all three of those kids, but even particularly Baker and Kyler, where the defense was just awful in games, and he was responsible for really without scoring everyone else, and DG just doesn't really have that capability, whether it just be him or whether it be some of the folks around him, just doesn't have that capability day in and day out to be able to game in and game out, I should say, to be able to do that. So I think the one thing that you will see is, I think you'll see a decent amount more in the run game with DG this year. I think Oklahoma, by and large, particularly after Oklahoma, after he suffered that concussion at TCU, I think I think the staff was very, and they saw what was behind DG. They were very reluctant to have him run, particularly any specific run calls for him. Now, this year with Jackson Arnold here, I think there will be a little bit more of a there's a little bit more trust in what Oklahoma has behind him at the quarterback position that will allow more run plays being called, more QB run plays. So I think that will be like a little bit of a different feel from the offense, and whether it be designed quarterback runs or whether it be just scramble situations and things like that. Without a doubt, will be part of that. But no, I know that there's a little bit of within the fan base. There's a little bit of Dillon Gabriel fatigue, right? I think there's the thought, obviously with Dillon Gabriel, that maybe he's not good enough to play at Oklahoma. He's a solid starter, but not a game changer. I think he's good enough to play, but we just have to remember what his ceiling is for Oklahoma, and it's not the same as Baker, Kyler, Jalen, Jason White, Josh Hyde, all of these guys, that have been through the program, and played at a very, very high level. So DG plays at a high level, but not quite at the level to essentially play for to hold the team on your back. So yeah, so there's not a whole lot of other questions here. So as we go through, we will have another. I'm planning on this tomorrow evening. So we will have another softball for you softball fanatics. Oklahoma softball live show tomorrow evening. I'll put something on the community page, so make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you get that. And then Mark and I will be at it next Wednesday, most likely. Obviously we said that schedules change and things happen, so we've got to move it sometimes for different times. But I think we will still plan on going. Then we'll move over to the defensive side of the ball, and start talking about defense, probably starting with the defensive line next week. So make sure you tune in for that. So on behalf of Mark, I thank you guys for being here on a Saturday morning. Thank you guys for waking up a little bit with us. If you slept in like myself, I slept in a little bit today, which is very unlike me. But yeah, make sure you guys come join us next Wednesday. Hit that like and subscribe button so you know if we change and have to go at a different time. But we will get cranking with the defensive side of the ball. I hope everyone has a great Easter weekend. God bless, and Boomer Sooner.